Right. The third item needing consideration today is consider approving a resolution opposing the proposed national monument. We have Amber Swayze, our senior managing analyst, to present. Good morning, Amber.
Good morning, commissioners. Before I start on this, I want to say thank you to Patrick in the attorney's office. He actually helped draft that letter. So I appreciate the help on that. Before you today is a resolution of Mesa County opposing designation in whole or in part of the proposed Dolores Canyons National Monument. I'm going to try to be brief in my presentation because there are a lot of people that feel really passionately about this and want to speak, and I want to give them time. So the proposed area is roughly 390,000 acres. Approximately 233,000 of that is in Mesa County. The rest is in Montrose County and San Miguel County. You'll see that my table shows 389,000. That's because the proposed boundary doesn't exactly line up with public lands. So I know they've adjusted that. I will say also the proponents have stated that this is a starting point for discussion and that the map is likely to change with more stakeholder input. It's expected that this national monument may be designated through the Antiquities Act of 1906, which authorizes the president to declare a national monument. Currently, the agencies in charge of these lands are BLM through the Grand Junction Field Office and the Uncompahgre Field Office, and then the U.S. Forest Service for the Grand Mesa, Uncompahgre, and Gunnison National Forests. It's expected that those would remain the land agencies in charge of this area, and we've been told that that's a benefit because these land agencies manage a national monument for conservation, where the national park manages for preservation. If there's a designation of a national monument, a resource management plan would be necessary, as would a travel management plan. And while that would provide the public an opportunity to give input, it would be restricted to what is in that proclamation. And we don't know what that language could look like. There is no guarantee that the BLM and the Forest Service will be the management agencies. And until we see that language, we don't know what will be required. I apologize, my mapping skills are subpar, and we have a really nice map online, but I wanted to highlight the boundary for the national monument, which is in the orange color that stands out. And then these are the layers over it that are currently designated through resource management plans. These include wilderness study areas, special recreation areas, wildlife habitat areas. A lot of this already has some layer of protection, and the proponents will say that these are administrative protections, meaning they could change when the resource management plan is updated. I don't dispute that. What I do think that this allows is an opportunity for land managers to respond to on-the-ground conditions as needed. It provides for more adaptive management as conditions change. Mesa County, as you know, contracted with Magellan Strategies to conduct a survey to find out what residents in the 3 counties thought of a national monument. Out of the 1,272 respondents in the 3 counties, only 21% found or felt that a national monument designation was the preferred method to protect these lands. Mesa County created a website, and this is more just information for those in the audience and watching. Mesa County created a website to provide with some additional information to our residents. It's on the landing page of the first page, www.mesacounty.us. There's a proposed Dolores Canyons National Monument link at the bottom. And on that page, we provide additional information, including the survey and the video from public hearing. We have information about public lands management, and then also contact information for elected officials for those that want to provide comments directly to you. We also have a mapping tool, and this is the pretty map that I talked about. On this map, users have an opportunity to turn on and off all of those layers that I just showed, utilizing the hamburger menu up in the right-hand corner. They also can provide a comment by dropping a pin on the map and then giving us thoughts on that area, whether they want to talk about a protection that's needed or a concern about a road that's going to be closed that gets them to important infrastructure that they need to maintain for a lease. And then at the bottom of the map, they can also click on the black arrow and it will show all of the comments in a condensed form so that they don't have to go and click on each of those pins to see what others have provided. I do have 2 corrections to the resolution that I would request be added into if we decide to move forward with it. The last whereas says 70% of residents. We'd like to change that to 72%. And then the second therefore, the word is conversation and it should be conservation. That is my last slide. I'm happy to answer questions if I can.
Great. Thank you, Amber. Commissioners, do you have any questions at this time? No.
I have no questions.
Okay. I am going to actually read the resolution. I think it's important for the public to have the actual resolution read into the record. So a resolution of Mesa County opposing designation in whole or in part of the proposed National Canyons National Monument. Whereas the Protect the Dolores Coalition has proposed a designation of approximately 400,000 acre Dolores Canyon National Monument, Mesa County, Montrose, San Miguel County, through the Antiquities Act of 1906, currently codified in pertinent part as 54 USC 320301 Antiquities Act. Whereas the designation of the Dolores Canyon National Monument as proposed under the Antiquities Act would occur through proclamation by the President of the United States outside of legislative process, and the subsequent management of the Dolores Canyon National Monument would occur under a management plan developed exclusively by one or more federal agencies with questionable consideration given to the views of local communities, their elected leaders, or these parties' practice of collaboration and cooperation established over the years through National Environmental Policy Act management plan development. And whereas the area developed for the Dolores Canyon National Monument is not unprotected. In fact, it currently is mired in layers of protection. It may see more as the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, finalizes the Grand Junction Field Office Resource Management Plan Amendment, the RMPA, which begins with the Uncompadre Field Office, RMPA, both in response to a lawsuit from the environmentalists. The United States Forest Service, USFS, is also finalizing the revision of the Grand Mesa, Uncompadre, and Gunnison Forest Plan, which incorporates additional protections for habitat connectivity. And whereas the current administrative protections conserve and preserve important resource values, including various birds, big game, plant species, recreation, and historical and cultural resources. Whereas the application resource management plan that established the management layers have been through multiple rounds of scrutiny, allowing public and local government and other federal agencies to evaluate, ask questions, and provide input before they were adopted by federal agencies with management authority for the area. And whereas the proposed designation would not change the managing agency of existing BLM and United States Forest Management. And whereas the lands proposed for the Dolores Canyon National Monument include valuable elemental resources such as helium, vanadium, uranium, and the last of which the United States has heavily sourced from Russia in recent years, but will be unable to source moving forward pending the president's signature of recently passed bipartisan legislation banning importation of Russian uranium, which further supports President Biden's Executive Order 14005, ensuring the future is made in all of America by all American workers. And whereas the proposed land also contains abundant timber, appropriated water, grazing lands, and the landscape itself is concerning outdoor recreation opportunities, those whose development and continued use would foster sustained social or strong local communities with greater region, economically and otherwise. And whereas the designation would drastically limit future opportunities that may present, such as science and research technology advances that would require resources to be accessible, such as but not limited to carbon capture, geothermal, and small-scale nuclear reactors, along with critical supply chain resources for semiconductors, electric vehicle batteries, steel, and concrete manufacturing. Whereas the designation would unnecessarily put our national security, economy, and all ally nations at significant disadvantage at a time when pivotal resources must be readily available to ensure security and stability domestically and abroad. Whereas the proposed national designation would bring uncertainty in federal funding, as it is unlikely that additional funding will be allocated to the proposed national monument. And Mesa County believes it's unsustainable and ill-advised to advocate for more lands that cannot be effectively funded or staffed. And whereas there are significant concerns for service and infrastructure deficiencies with rapid influx of potential tourism that designation would attract in the Dolores Canyon region, including those vital to public health and safety, such as fire and rescue, road and bridge, public health, and sanitation facilities, and also cellular service. Whereas Mesa County is comprised of approximately 73% of federal managed public lands, which provides substantial socioeconomic benefits, but also removes the land from local control, leaving roughly a quarter of the county open to private land activities and production. This broadly limits a community's ability to address pressing local, state, and national issues, such as affordable housing, affordable energy, good paying jobs, and the overall local approach to a multifaceted business development and opportunities to generate new economic activities from non-recreation sources such as manufacturing. As such, the ability to meet future unseen demands would be exacerbated with a national monument designation. Whereas a national monument designation would severely limit the practicality and the flexibility needed to address water conservation by adding unnecessary red tape and layers of bureaucracy and inefficiencies in a critical juncture in our Colorado water future, such as replacing aging agriculture infrastructure and innovative water storage solutions as necessary. Whereas 70% of the residents, which now we're going to adjust that to 72% of the residents in Mesa and Montrose and San Miguel counties, believe that a presidential proclamation creating a national monument in the Dolores Canyon area is not the right approach to conservation in the region. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of County Commissioners of Mesa County that number one, Mesa County strongly opposes designation in whole or in part of the proposed Dolores Canyon National Monument, and will individually and in collaboration with our regional partners and local communities take appropriate formal steps in opposition to such an effort. And number two, Mesa County in partnership with Montrose County will lead a thoughtful and thorough community process that engages all stakeholders, including all tribal governments, to develop an appropriate and more sustainable form of conservation in the area. So that is the resolution that we were considered, and I thought it was pertinent to be able to actually read that resolution into the record. So the commissioners don't have any comment or questions at this time, but we will now take public comments. And if you have public comment, please come forward and state your name into the record. You'll have 3 minutes. Good morning.
Just a note of levity. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for taking the time to hear us. It sounds like Montrose County is going to have to add a few more whereases to our resolution. We'll get right on that. So thank you for considering opposition to the proposed Dolores National Monument. As you know, we are.
So kind as to identify yourself.
Did I not do that?
She did, but.
Sue Hanson, Montrose County Commissioner. You want my address?
Thank you for the
It's
diligence.
Sorry. I'm usually on that side. Anyway, thank you for considering the opposition to the National Monument. We also agree with you and think for the very same reasons that this was an appropriate measure. We felt like in the beginning, there were flaws in the original stakeholder process, leaving out many of the residents that you will hear from today that would be affected in that area. We also believe the designation or the area talked about already has plenty of levels of protection and has been protected for decades to this point without any problems. So between wilderness study, wilderness areas, national conservation areas, we feel like it has great protection. We're concerned about the extraction activities. We're concerned that the national monument pretty much engulfs the Uravan mineral belt for the very same reasons that we talk about renewable energy and some of our goals nationwide for our country. And the banning of uranium from Russia. It seems to me that we are being foolish in this designation that would cover that and prohibit some extraction activities. So we're optimistic that, and hopefully not foolishly so, that we would be able to come to an agreement with the proponents, sit down with Montrose and Mesa County and come up with some options that would be workable for everybody, considering all the protections that are now there that would not include national monument designation. So we're looking for coming together so that we can all agree on some of these solutions that might satisfy proponents, not just one special interest group, but all of the extraction, ranching, mining, everyone, all multiple uses, which is what BLM was supposed to be all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Does anyone else in the public like to make public comment at this time? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Russ Andrews. I'm running for Congress for Lauren Boebert's seat as a Republican. I hail from the Roaring Fork Valley, but I do aim to represent the great people of Mesa County. I've lived in the Western Slope for 30 years. I have a degree in marine engineering, which essentially means that I went to school to learn how to design and operate mobile and stationary electric power plants. The Uravan Belt is the target of the Dolores Monument land and water grab. The belt, which is a conglomeration of the words uranium and vanadium, contains $15 billion worth of uranium and vanadium. Uranium is obviously used in the 92 American nuclear power plants to generate carbon-free electricity, and it's obviously also used to manufacture nuclear weapons. Our friends on the left insist that we move from baseline, always there electricity, to intermittent, not always there electricity, while simultaneously adding 70% demand to our grid via electric vehicles and artificial intelligence computing. As a power plant engineer, I can guarantee you that these folks are delusional and live in fantasy land. There is absolutely no way that wind and solar exclusively can power our massive economy. And I can further guarantee you that our future energy needs will be met in large part, much larger than what they are today with nuclear power. The US contains just 4% of all worldwide uranium deposits. Barring mining of 1/5 of those deposits in this country presents a huge national security issue. Uninformed socialists and their irk, they don't like capitalism, they're terrified of nuclear power, and many of them, I think, despise our country. They would like nothing more than to lock up and prevent access to the Uravan Belt, so they've dressed up the Dolores Monument issue in sheep's clothing in order to achieve their denuclearization goals. Commissioners, you have a binary choice. Do you lock up the Uravan Belt and the Dolores Corridor to essentially attract tourists from New York City to float the Dolores, which they can already do? Or do you maintain access to these vital national security resources? The Dolores Monument is a land grab, an energy grab, a weapons grab, a water grab, and a grazing rights grab. It's that simple, and I urge you to vote for the resolution of opposition to this utter nonsense. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Does anyone else have public comment at this time? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
Hi, my name is Amy Tooker. I live in Nuka, Colorado. I just want to thank you for entertaining this motion to oppose. Obviously, my community is very much in opposition to this. One thing about my community is that we are a tier 1 coal-affected community, and there's 4 communities in the state of Colorado. The governor and the State General Assembly signed House Bill 191314 concerning our coal-affected communities, and they pledged a just and inclusive transition away from coal. for our community and for our economy. With that, they formed the Office of Just Transition, and the Office of Just Transition created the Just Transition Action Plan. And what that basically says is it directs state agencies to work with communities to drive their own economic transitions. It's specific in the plan. I am on that advisory board, and just to do that, to help other communities and my own community drive our own economic transition. We do not want to be force-fed a recreation industry. We've been working on our transition plans and our economic diversification plans for a long time. And we know that we can balance our recreation, our ranching, our farming, and our mining all together so that they don't interfere with each other and that we could have a year-round stable economy. This proposed national monument has put a halt in all of those plans and those processes. We've worked really hard with our partners. Before the Office of Just Transition was formed, 2 years ahead of schedule, our coal mine and our coal plant were closed. So we did this on our own with our partners. But now that we have state support from Governor Polis, from the State General Assembly, and from the Office of Just Transition, we can move those processes forward easier and with more resources. The one thing that's been really beautiful about this opposition is the community coming together to fight this. And it's not just, it's Gateway and Egner and Norwood and Natarita and Nucla and Bedrock and Paradox. Gateway was someplace I would just drive through to come to Grand Junction. But once this opposition came in, we all came together. And so my community is not just the west end of Montrose County anymore. My community are these places and these people that are coming to me and saying, thank you for opposing this and working so hard and reaching out on Facebook and emails. And so on behalf of my community and my new community, please oppose this national monument. It's not what we want. We want to just continue to do what we need to do to move forward our own economy. We've been working really hard, and these proponents, this coalition needs to step aside. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hooker. Does anyone else have public comment on this item? Please step forward and say your name to the record. Good morning.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Doug Bryant. I'm from Grand Junction. Don't live in that area, but I've worked in that area a lot, got to know the ranchers, the miners, everybody else. I have a world of respect for how hard they work. Despite all the assurances of no changes, I think the real reason for this whole process is to gain control of the natural resources, particularly the water, excuse me. That is the agenda of the globalist forces that are hard at work trying to destroy our country. About 5 years ago, I went over Willow Creek Pass. Both sides of that pass, there was 95% lodgepole pine death. When I got just before Rand, I stopped to work at a ranch on their cattle scale. All the trees around there were very healthy. I asked the rancher, how come your trees didn't get killed by the pine beetle? He said, they had logged them all and they grew back on their own. I asked him, why aren't they logging the trees up there on the pass? He said, well, every time they tried, about 15 lawsuits by environmental wackos would stop them from doing it. I believe that the destruction of the timber industry is part of the same agenda that's trying to get this Dolores monument passed. I mean, we had way healthier forests back in the 70s when I first came to Colorado. But now, what do we have? You drive anywhere and you see all the dead trees. And I think we need to put the people in that county, in that area, in charge of deciding the future, not these outside globalist forces that are, I believe, trying to destroy our country. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Does anyone else have public comment on this item? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
Good morning, County Commissioners. I'm Leslie Myers of Grand Junction. And I look at this picture and think, why would we want to do anything but preserve that as a national monument and not have mining other than the historic mining that has taken place there? I mean, future generations can come and see what has happened, and it's just beautiful. To change that designation to me makes little sense. It's one of the last wild places here. I mean, if we were voting to change the designation of the Colorado National Monument, I would oppose that as well. Or why would we jeopardize mining in there that, for uranium or any other reason? That makes no sense to me. I enjoy going there, being alone, and experiencing just nature and the pristine value of it. So I'd like to see it maintained as a national monument. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Does anyone else have public comment on this item? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
I'm Ray Gooch. I live on Highway 141, which is covered with this monument proposal. I feel like it is a U.S. constitutional violation. In Article 1, our legislators are charged with financing all the government operations. We already have the Forest Service, the BLM, and several other government U.S. financed entities that they should have the control of. And now we're going to throw another layer on top of those. Who is going to manage the money? I'm looking at the purse strings, and this looks like a big fiasco to me, that the U.S. Constitution is covering this already in Article 1 between the House of Representatives and the Senate. They're not being included in this argument. They're just getting bulldozed right over. I don't like it. Of course I don't like it. I live there. I'm one of the family. And I'm throwing this point into the mix because I think it is being ignored. We have the responsibility for keeping this pristine, and the people that have been doing this for a long time, I don't know, hundreds of years now, have done a wonderful job, and that's what everybody likes about it. If you turn this into a national monument, that puts it on par with Mount Rushmore and other national monuments that are being advertised worldwide. Any rancher will tell you that if you take and put too much population on the area, you'll overgraze it and you'll kill it. You can do that with the population influx. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. Does anyone else have public comment at this time on this item? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
My name is Brady Pearson. I live here in Loma, Mesa County resident. I'm here on behalf of the Mesa County Cattlemen's Association. I'm the vice president, and I'm here to represent our members, and we're against any sort of national monument and for the resolution letter. For obvious reasons, the grazing right now, yeah, they say it's not going to change and it's all going to be managed by the same people, but it always changes. I've seen it. I grew up in Utah, and Zion National Park, the Bears here's national monument, just happens over and over and over again. And they've already got enough to fight for, all the ranchers around here. And obviously there's 236,000 acres that is in Mesa County that we'll essentially lose control of. And that's not right. We should be able to control our acreage in our counties, how we see fit, not somebody from way back east that has no idea what's going on. that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Does anyone else from the audience have public comment at this time? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
Morning, Commissioners. Bryce Casto. I'm a sixth generation rancher on the Dolores. I'm from Gateway. I run from the Gunnison all the way to the Dolores County line up there. Have kids involved in operation. My family's been on them lands before the Forest Service or the BLM was ever put in speculation. They weren't there. They didn't exist when we started. We're still doing the same ground that we have always done, making a living off of it. This picture that's right here, placing pretty close there, but we kind of manage that in hand and foot with the BLM. I'm opposed to the monument. I'm opposed to the NCA, anything else they're going to put on it. It's one of the last places that we got that's not overregulated and controlled by everything. Very opposed to the situation. Don't want nothing to do with it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Castle. I appreciate it. Does anyone else have public comment at this time? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
Good morning. My name is Sean Pond. I live in Nucla, Colorado. And there's not a whole lot left to say after all of this, other than this land is protected. It is in the pristine condition because of the stakeholders of this land. And this isn't about conservation. This is about controlling our lands and our liberties. And I applaud the Mesa County Commissioners, and I ask you to help us halt the Dolores Monument. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pond. Does anyone else in the audience have any comments on this item? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Andrew Massey. I've much the same situation as Bryce Casto. We've been there forever, and I know that a lot of the information that I was going to cover has been well covered within your whereas letter. Had a conversation with Scott here, and I feel like we all want the same thing. You know, everybody wants clean air, clean water, clean everything. But we all have different ideas about how to go about it. Now, the Antiquities Act, I think Scott and I are going to completely have a forever disagreement about this. But I don't think landscapes are included in the Antiquities model. Antiquities Act is supposed to cover the smallest possible footprint. It's supposed to cover, you know, it's supposed to be an immediate act for an emergency situation. Now, I don't see the existential threat to this area. It's been managed the same way for 50 years, and it seems to be thriving well. One of the other questions that Scott and I had considered together was, do we want to see mines completely covering this area? And I would say there already are mines completely covering this area. Not many of them are active at this point, but that's been because of the market of uranium, but it potentially, as you've noted in your whereas statements, that they are potentially going to, the market's coming back. But one other consideration I wanted to put on that is, do I want to see mines covering this entire area? If it keeps me from having to learn Chinese, you betcha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Massey. Is there any other public comments at this time? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Al Sisson. I live in the Gateway area and worked there as well since 2009, after retiring from what I thought was the best job in the world, is flying in the Marine Corps. By happenstance, I knew the development in Gateway that was coming, the resort, and had an opportunity to do what is truly now, I think, the best job in the world is flying air tours through that amazing landscape. Like everyone else here, yeah, I want to keep what we have. And I think it's important to take note that regardless of the ranching and mining that has been in that area for a long time, it is still that landscape that we see pictured. It is still that beautiful and that pristine under the current management efforts. I think we all need to be careful when we ask about how do we want to go about protecting something? And it has to be the right protections by the right process. A designation simply bypasses a lot of stakeholder input. And most of the stakeholders, in my opinion, are in this room. And that process, by a proclamation and a presidential signature, I think is going to get the cart before the horse. What we all love about that area is how remote and isolated it is. And, you know, I like to go there and be by myself as well as the next person. The designation is going to bring a number of visitations that I don't think Highway 141 or those local communities are going to be ready for. There is nothing in place for that. Even currently, we will see people stop on the highway to take pictures in the most inopportune area. The thought of seeing that in the hundreds more is a frightening thought, especially for the local EMS crews that would have to deal with that. I think we need to have the right availability for use as well as protections. Being able to recreate in that area is vitally important, not just for the resort, but the air tour operations or anyone else that wants to use that. Once we relinquish to somebody in DC to write what the management plan is going to be, we're going to lose control of that. So I urge approving this opposition to the monument. I think it needs to be locally driven and locally sourced and locally partnered on with how we're going to protect what we currently have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sisson. Are there any more public comments at this time? Please come forward and state your name to the record.
Deborah Moreland, Fruta. I'm back
Welcome
and I
back.
won't go into, well, okay, I won't. Anyway, I grew up on a ranch up on Glade Park, a cattle ranch. And Gateway and Glade Park have been sister communities back, well, my family homesteaded on Glade Park. We're no longer up there. But the Gateway community, in spite of a huge vertical cliff behind us, we have been sister communities for back in the old days. We always got to each other's dances and expanded the gene pools of both communities. I just want to say that this is kind of the old stomping grounds and where I'm kind of, taken back by how broadly this has been drawn and how it comes clear up on Pinyon Mesa and way beyond the Dolores, justifying it as a Dolores corridor. And I am very much against the abuse of the Antiquities Act. And that is something that we're probably pretty much powerless over. But I really think this should not be done that way. And I pray that Biden doesn't have his name on it at any point. And we just need to step back. And I thank you for, it's great to agree on something. I really want to step back, see it, step back. A lot has already been said. We got to stop tying up resources, precious resources that affect our national security. Ranches are struggling. The ranchers that are still around, it's kind of a miracle. They're struggling. We need to, step back. And I really am in that part and wanted to speak on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moreland. If you have public comment, you can come forward at this time.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm John Justman from Fruta. I've recreated a lot down here. I don't have any property down there. I don't live there. I do have an old ore truck that used to haul down the niche. I own that sucker. And that's my closest relationship to this thing. But I just look at that canyon, and if that picture is fairly recent, and it was managed under the 1976 FLIPMA Act, where it's multiple use. It certainly doesn't look destroyed. And the ranching community, if you have a grazing permit, you're not going to destroy the property because you plan on going back next year. And we talked about the uranium that's there. I think down the road, we're going to need it. And I think this is just an end around to get away from multiple use on the public lands. And I'm sad that the BLM office had to go back to Washington. They were here and they could have managed all this property much better than they can from DC. And but are we also telling the BLM and the Forest Service, you folks have done a lousy job here, and now we're going to turn it into this national monument to attract thousands and thousands of people to come? And when you drive down the canyon, you're going to see a ramp so you can put your raft in the river, or you're going to have a place to eat at, or a expanded parking area and more campgrounds. That's saving and protecting the area? I don't think so. And in Mesa County, the largest agriculture producer dollar-wise to the county is the beef livestock industry. That's where these people have lived. You heard the ranchers testify that have been there for generations. By looking at this picture, they surely haven't destroyed it. And like that gentleman said, the logging, we're so against doing anything. We want to save, and in the end, the forest goes downhill. And the same with the wildfires. If the cattle weren't out there grazing it, we'd have more wildfire problems than we have today. So overall, I don't see why we have to protect it. And if you do want to protect the river so badly, how come you're 20 miles from the river in some places? That's protecting it? No, that's trying to take it over and push the livestock people out, or the hikers, or the hunters, or the ATV people. That's what I think this is all about. And all new wealth comes out of the ground. It doesn't come from a bunch of bureaucrats in DC or conservationists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dressman. Does anyone else from the audience have any public comment at this time? Go ahead. Please state your name to the record.
Hi, I'm Scott Braden. I'm the director of the Colorado Wildlands Project and a resident of Mesa County. As a representative of the Protect the Dolores Coalition, I'm here to speak in support of designating the Dolores Canyons National Monument. Permanent protection of these public lands in Mesa and Montrose counties will ensure that future generations can benefit from and enjoy the natural, historic, and recreational values of the area. A monument designation would help create proactive management to handle increasing visitation and growing recreational demand in a way that protects special scientific, historical, and cultural values, while at the same time honoring the existing uses and valid existing rights, such as water rights, access to roads and trails, grazing, and mining claims. I do not support the resolution that Mesa County is considering today. I believe that it does not reflect the will of a substantial portion of your constituents who support conservation for the outstanding public lands surrounding the Dolores River. Our county and the Western Slope is changing, and attitudes about how economies and how our public lands ought to be managed and stewarded are changing as well. Our economies are more diverse, and as businesses and new residents decide to relocate here, they are far more drawn to the recreational opportunities and quality of life guaranteed by our plentiful public lands, and less so what can be mined, drilled, or extracted from them. People want healthy, locally sourced food, and our public lands ranchers play an important role in our food security. That's why their ability to continue ranching in any proposed conservation designation is important to me and my coalition. Ultimately, I'm confident that regardless of what action you take here today, the Dolores River Canyon country will be permanently protected. I believe that the elected leadership in Mesa and Montrose counties are important stakeholders' voice, and as constituents, we expect and hope you will stay at the table and engaged with this issue. But the status quo is not a plan. For 50 years, Coloradans have proposed permanent protections for this landscape. And whether the instrument of conservation is a national monument or a different approach, one thing is clear. The people of Colorado and the Western Slope want to see us come together, roll up our sleeves, and in a timely and thoughtful manner, protect the Dolores. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Does anyone else have public comment at this time? Please step forward, say your name to the record.
Good morning, Nova Tucker. I'm a Mesa County resident and I really didn't plan on saying anything, but y'all know me. And so the things that I think about is I look around at all the land grabs that we've had nationally. And you look at the Colorado National Monument, and I have loved the National Monument my entire life and I have accessed it. And it's $25 to drive into that park now. It has become unaffordable along with everything else that's unaffordable. And we are looking at the government taking more than they can take care of. And this claim that they're going to maintain it and we're still going to have access to it is not honest. Our ranchers depend on that land and we depend on those ranchers. And just because we've had a bunch of new people move into the area from cities across the nation who don't share our values and don't have our common ground of respect for this area and respect for the resources that we own. The ranchers having grazing rights, our water rights, our access to our minerals. They do not belong to the federal government. They belong to the people of Colorado. And if we give that away, we will never have access to it again. That is our birthright as being born and raised in this area. And so outsiders do not have the right to come in and take from us what is rightfully ours and take away our resources to having homegrown food, things that are available to us that would not be available once they take this away. So I really appreciate your support and your vote to keep this from happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Does anyone else have public comment on this item? Last call. No, please come forward and state your name to the record.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Janie Van Winkle. I'm a long time, I hate saying that because these gray hairs are starting to show, livestock producer here in Western Colorado. I've grown up and I've lived in and I've stayed connected to the families that you see here today. I graduated from Nucla High School. This matters a lot to me. We have ranch property in the proposed map area and a U.S. Forest Service permit will be impacted as well. I've been assured by the proponents and Scott and I've had a number of conversations recently that the Dolores River Monument designations, that my concerns around grazing are misplaced. I've repeatedly been told not to worry, nothing will change. Livestock producers in other areas impacted by monument designations tell us a different story. I'm going to read you just a small excerpt from the Bears Ears National Monument designation. Should grazing permits or leases be voluntarily relinquished by existing holders, the secretary shall retire from livestock grazing the lands covered by such permits or leases pursuant to the processes of applicable law. And what that means, if I want to transfer our grazing permit to Dean and Taylor and Paisley that are sitting back here, the way that process works is I relinquish those back to the agency and then the agency transfers those. I'm understanding this language to say that once I give them back, end of story. It no longer can be done through intergenerational transfer. And I want to remind the commissioners, I've said this several times here, that every cow in Mesa County contributes $600 to $800 and not just the days and the years that she comes on vacation. She's here every single year. So I want to say, let's do this the right way. Many in the environmental community believe that they need to do more. Let's sit down at the table like Scott and I did last week. Let's get to know each other. Let's find some common ground and work toward a plan that takes local folks' ideas and thoughts into considerations. Let's have an inclusive conversation for as long as it takes. The people behind this movement have told me, Scott has told me, Scott, you're the face, so you get blamed for everything. There's other people involved as well, but Scott has in recent times taken time to talk. But in recent times, the people behind this movement have told me that it takes too long. Perpetuity is a long time. Let's get this done correctly and the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Winkle. Does anyone else have a public comment at this time? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion at this time.
Thoughts? All right, I want to thank everybody for coming in today. There's a lot of passion on this on both sides. And Scott, thanks for coming into the belly of the beast today. But I want to start by saying, I don't think that, as Mr. Macy said as well, that our values are all that misaligned. I think we all desire to protect lands, water, clean air, all that thing. I think we often just grab for different tools of management. In my mind, there's no debate about protecting the Dolores. The Dolores has, a unique ecosystem, diversity of wildlife, all these great aspects about it, cultural resources, outdoor rec, and a litany of private land managers that have been there for decades, for centuries, who are doing a good job managing that. I've gotten a lot of emails from proponents in the last day or two, and they're quoting a new percentage of support for the Dolores protection. That's 92% of those support protections in the Dolores area. Our poll showed north of 70% support protections in the Dolores area. However, the misnomer is that there's 92% support for a national monument in the area. And on our whereas, we have 72% of people support something other than a national monument. And this is a local poll. This isn't a national poll. This is local people living in the area that took this poll: Montrose, Mesa County, and San Miguel. I don't think support for conservation means that we have to turn our backyard into a national museum. I think I had an op-ed in the papers several months ago, and it showed the litany of protections that are there now. Turning the Dolores area into a national monument, in my opinion, to use an analogy, is like taking a sledgehammer to hang a picture on the wall. The tool, in my opinion, is far too blunt for the specific and tailored approach that it needs. In my opinion, if anything, it appears that the Dolores needs maybe a hemming rather than a full-on new outfit, i.e. the national monument. If there are specific areas that need additional protection, and Scott, you and I have had conversations on specific areas that may need specific protections, let's focus on them and protect them. And I think that's the entire point of our resolution this morning. This resolution shouldn't be seen as anti-conservation. In fact, the resolution in my mind is a resounding yes to conservation in a tailored approach, and a respectful and conscientious no to putting the proverbial sledgehammer through the wall. Our second, therefore, says, and I'll read it, says Mesa County in partnership with Montrose County, and to be honest with you, hopefully with our federal delegation as well, will lead a thoughtful and thorough community process that engages all stakeholders, including tribal governments, to develop an appropriate and more sustainable form of conservation in the area. I think there's common ground to be found, but I do not think the National Monument is the way to go about it. And I'm interested and very excited about a process that takes all the stakeholders into engagement and says, what's the best way to protect it? Sometimes the best government action, in my view, is no government action. That's an option. I want to go into this thing open-minded. So let's find out what needs to actually be protected and protected. And again, I agree with many of the speakers who said it seemed to be a bit of an abuse of the Antiquities Act. It was meant for very specific tailoring, specific cultural monuments, things of very tailored nature, not a broad swath. So those are my comments, and I am in full support of this resolution.
Thank you.
I'll try and be brief and not repeat many of the things Commissioner Davis said that I agree with. One speaker stated that she's supporting us keeping it a national monument. So I wanted to clarify a couple things. It is not currently a monument. The proponents are asking for it to be a designation. But I make that point because that same speaker said it's beautiful and she enjoys spending time there, which underscores the fact that it's already preserved so the public can enjoy it. I believe the tourism that would come from a national monument will have a huge negative impact in the area. It'll only bring in far more tourists. The fire district in Gateway has an annual budget of about $400,000. Half of that comes from Gateway Canyons as a voluntary donation. If they had to rely just on the tax base, it would cut it in half. Currently, they have 4 full-time EMTs, 1 part-time, and 3 volunteers. And they only have 2 working at any given time. So that means if they're on a call, and these calls can take 2, 3, 4 hours, another call comes in, there's no one to help them. So what happens now if you double the tourism, then you double the need, but you haven't doubled the funds. And we have to be cognizant of the fact it doesn't even fund itself. And will this stay the same? If everything is going to stay the same, what's the purpose? I believe the proponents don't want it to stay the same. In fact, today, one of them said he doesn't want status quo. You can't say that. And then with regards to grazing or mining, saying nothing is going to change. It's one way or the other. I do agree with Janie. We need to work together, which is why we added the second piece of our resolution that Commissioner Davis just read. We want a more robust process for citizen engagement, and I support this resolution.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with all of the comments that have been stated between our board. You can thank me for all the whereases. So was very diligent in making sure all of our community was really represented in our resolution, and the concerns that rural Mesa County really had a voice in our resolution. And it was really thoughtful of what is happening federally and some of the federal goals, buying American, making sure that we can sustain our national security. Some of these things are so important. And so it's up to us as your elected officials to not only be your voice, but also see a bigger picture. And our resolution, I think, really represents all of those concerns. It was very important to me to listen, to be at every listening session that I could be at. We went to Gateway. We spent a considerable amount of time with our senator's staff. And I honestly think it's kudos to our senators that a lot of folks would rather see a legislative process that engages stakeholders through a more thoughtful process than just a national monument. We learned so much through our survey, and it was important to us to make sure that we asked, what do you want? How is this going to affect you? I have a book that's on my desk. It's really thick, and it has all of the families, their historical stories, their pictures, their blood, sweat, and tears of generations of Dolores Canyon families and their stories. And they deserve self-government. They deserve a voice at the table. And I was elected to represent Mesa County. I was not elected to represent DC County. We already have 73% public lands. We have a beautiful, diversified economy. And it's a wonderful, and that's why people want to come visit here. But I do not want to see something hit the president's desk and have political whiplash of a president signing a proclamation, and then someone else comes into the White House and changes it. We deserve better here. Our lands deserve better. And it's my honor to represent you guys and to be at the table for your voice. I want to say a special kudos to Senator Hickenlooper's office and also Senator Bennett. They really want to listen, and I really am going to take them at that value of making sure we're having a collaborative process. And our therefores at the end of our resolution really does set the table for, we want everyone at the table. We want environmentalists at the table. We want tribes at the table. We want our local representatives at the table. We're not coming in here with we have an agenda. We want to listen. We want to see what your interests are. We want to bring together this collaborative effort for our residents. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to set the table. We're going to build a table and make sure everybody's there and invited and included. And your voices and concerns. We'll work with our federal partners as well, but really want to thank you all for your engagement. We can't do this without you. And I truly believe in self-government, and this is the perfect example. So kudos to you guys. I really appreciate this. So I'll bring it back to the board to consider this resolution. I will entertain a motion to approve the item as entered into the record.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, yes, correct. Thank you for that reminder. I'll entertain a motion to approve the item as amended into the record.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.